Welcome to URI Just Getting Started. We have a special guest today, Tom Aiello. He's a Fordham expert, and it's very apropos to have him on today because URI is facing Fordham on Wednesday at 7 p.m. ESPN Plus. How are you, Thomas?
I'm doing good, Scott. It's interesting start in Atlantic 10 play, I think, across the board. We're recording this on New Year's Eve. A lot of college games across all of the leagues, but the Atlantic 10 looks like it's going to be caving in on itself again. But nonetheless, I'm excited to talk Fordham versus URI coming up on the 4th.
Yeah, it is an interesting season, and it's wide open. So I think you'll like that.
Right now, Fordham is trying to get back to that, and they're still in that rebuild.
Tell me about Fordham. Our fans are really excited. They have so many questions. We're going to go to them later on in the show. We have a PowerPoint. I'm just going to sit back and let me know what to expect for URI Nation against Fordham.
So I think the first thing is that the first Davidson game for Fordham was a little bit of a wake-up call because they had obviously been criticized publicly by a lot of people about their schedule, which is a fair complaint, but it's not anything that's new to this program because that's been what's been going on for a while now. And beyond Keith Urgo and Neptune, Jeff Neubauer was really the guy who kind of started this whole cupcake scheduling thing just to sort of build confidence, I guess, but it may be in a way to give himself more leniency when his time was starting to tick a lot quicker. But right now, the schedule, given that Neptune left really late and the ops had changed in June or July, I believe it was, so they had to do a little bit of pivoting. That's part of the reason why the schedule was the way it was. Now, it's not to say that Tulane or Harvard or Arkansas by no means are bad teams. I mean, those were, I thought, pretty quality teams, and Fordham goes to Tulane to beat them. But looking at the Atlantic 10, and every year, even when the league is not good, when it's sending 5 teams, it's still an extremely physical, much faster style of play than what Fordham saw in their out-of-conference schedule, if you're excluding Arkansas, Tulane, and Harvard, right?
Yeah.
So right now, the team last year was a success because they went 500. Neptune brought in all these guys. They lost Antonio Day mid-season. A couple other guys left. One, I think, dropped down to JUCO, if I remember correctly. Another guy went to Coppin State. 2 others graduated. So Keith Urgo gets the job. He is weaving 5 freshmen into this whole thing. They added 1 transfer who was a graduate transfer from Georgia Tech, and Khalid Moore, who they really, really like, and he's been a really good player for them. But they're still trying to figure out, I think, how they're going to be successful in the Atlantic 10 long term. I think that there's still a lot of things that they're going to work on. I think one of them is obviously the schedule and competing at a high level in the conference, but they're working on still building a culture, establishing what they're going to play like, who's going to be a regular face at Rosehill. But for the most part, in a lot of the areas that this program has tanked in for a long time, and that's recruiting, culture, the schedule, fan interest, all that jazz, right? The recruiting's been really good the first 2 years under this new Urgo Neptune hybrid regime. The culture has been pretty much established to this point. And the marketability and the public image of the team has certainly improved. With that being said, there's still things they're trying to work on. And when you have 5 freshmen, that really can throw the whole thing, not totally off, but it can definitely, there's going to be some growing pains. I think that's what Fordham's going through right now.
Imagine if Jay Wright didn't retire and Joel Soriano stayed.
Yeah.
Because I think he could have with a coach like Neptune. We might be seeing, I think you're doing really well, and people might already be giving up on you, some of the more critical, snobbish fans. But I've looked at your team, did a lot of research on it. I see some really good parts to it. So individually, where's Keith Urgo from? What's his background? Because he's really doing a great job.
So Keith Urgo he's from the DC area. He coached at Gonzaga High School for a while. He had played at Fairfield under Tim O'Toole. He had played with one of the assistants who's on the staff right now, Ty Goody, who was, I believe, that league's defensive player of the year at one point. And he has brought him along to the staff, but he spent time at Gonzaga High School. Then he was found by Jay Wright, spent some time there, and was part of a Final Four team. And then when Pat Chambers took the Penn State job, Urgo went with him, became the associate head coach for a majority of his time there. And then when Neptune came to Fordham, he got that associate head coaching role. But as Urgo has put it, he said when Neptune called him that the idea was they were going to be the co-head coaches. But Keith Urgo was also last year doing a lot of the culture building, a lot of the recruiting. He brought in a lot of kids from the portal. 3 kids followed him from Penn State. One of them was Patrick Kelly and Abdu Simbila, 2 guys who found a home at Fordham. Another one was DJ Gordon, who left the program early last year as well. And he also brought in Jamari Wheeler's brother, Antrel Charleton, who came from JUCO. So he's definitely brought in an array of talent and personality from last year. The 3 of them have obviously stayed at Fordham. 2 of them start, but he's also really taken pride in delegating certain things to the staff, right? Like he obviously knows it's not a one-man job. They hired, you'll remember this name, Dave Paulson has been a key assistant for this group.
George
Trey
Mason.
Woodall. Yep. George Mason, Bucknell. Trey Woodall, who's the associate head coach, who was a star at Pitt. Neptune pulled him from Mark Schmidt's staff up at St. Bonaventure. Henry Lowe, who's been their player development guy, and Ron Ramon, another former legend at Pitt, also coming over from Pitt, actually. He was their basketball ops guy. So Urgo has definitely taken pride in sort of delegating who's doing what on the staff, but it's a good mix of experience, talented young people, and I think they know what they're doing, right? They know how to work within the constraints that they're given at Fordham. Now, I know that in past years, administrations have been questioned. The previous AD before the one that the school has now, there were some complaints with how things were being handled, and there was also complaints about coaches and administration maybe not being on the same page, but that's changed completely. And they're making the most of what they have. But Urgo he definitely knows what he's doing. He can play good cop and bad cop. He's been at it for a long time. I think that's really been huge for this group.
One big win was keeping Quisenberry. People transfer more than once now, and he had a great year last year, and there must have been some offers, but when you bring in Urgo, maybe he thought twice. And I don't know, more, you're inside Fordham basketball, but I thought that was a good win for him besides his X and O's. But Rhode Island had some bad news. Josephat Bilal is a 6'11" center transfer from Wichita State and JUCO. He's really surprised us. He just hurt his knee. He could be out the whole season, and we could be centerless. Any questions you have on Rhode Island?
Well, I guess I have one. So I think for me, with Archie coming back to the Atlantic 10, I know he got burned out a little bit at Indiana. Yeah. He's formerly known with Dayton, where he did a really, really good job. I think the identity thing, the identity of this URI team, who does what, right? You got to know what sort of play style you want to be. And to me, the Rams don't look like there's one that particularly will stand out long-term, at least right now. Mm-hmm. But I guess for me, Ishmael Leggett being the leading scorer, did you see that coming? That's where I really want to ask you. Did you see that coming at all?
I don't think anyone did. They thought they saw it coming last year because he had a really good freshman year and he's a sophomore now. But no one saw it coming, but we do know what he can do, and he's slowing down a little bit. Yeah, when we recruited him with David Cox, he was definitely someone that we thought could become the next star. He's from Jeff Dowden territory. Why don't we go over to the PowerPoint I have now? Let's talk about some of the players on the team this year. And we're really noticing Khalid Moore, but he's played well in the OOC. But what about going into the conference? I know he's been a role player all his career, even at Georgia Tech, and now he's starting to become someone you could depend on. And tell me about him. What kind of player is he, and what can you expect as we go into a rugged Atlantic 10?
So I remember the first time I met Khalid was at the press conference. They introduced Urgo officially as the head coach. They had him on his visit, and I think Adam Zagoria had tweeted it out. I'm pretty sure it was Zagoria. I don't remember 100%. That Khalid Moore, there was a number of schools. I think Fordham was one of the first schools he visited. I think he had about 10 or 11 schools on his list. And he walks in, and I go to one of the coaches and I say, "Hey, is that Khalid Moore?" And he goes, "Yeah, go." And the coach goes, "Yeah, can you go talk to him?" I'm like, "Well, what do you want me to say to him?" I had no idea what to say to the kid. I've never recruited a kid before, and I'm just going up to talk to him for 2 minutes. So I go up to Khalid and I go, "Hi, what's up, man? You're Khalid Moore." He goes, "Yeah, yeah." And I go, "Yeah, I'm Thomas. What do you think of Fordham?" All the basic questions. How are the coaches treating you? Right? All that fun stuff. And then one of the big alumni donors comes over. It takes over the conversation. So then we go through the press conference, and Khalid is sitting there. He's mingling. People seem to like him. He was very, I think he's very quiet generally, but he's a good guy, very nice guy. Will always talk to student media, always talks to the media people like ESPN Plus sideline reporters that Fordham has for those games. But when I think he came here, he realized, you know what? I'm from the area. There's an opportunity for this team. I can have an impact here. We sort of thought, at least I did. I can't speak for the rest of my fellow WFUV members, but I sort of thought he was going to maybe do the 8 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists thing.
Yeah,
sort of like a light version of Draymond Green. But he totally exploded in the first game of the season when he goes for 18 and 7. And I go, oh, okay, wait a second. This guy was averaging 4 points at Georgia Tech. His defensive box score numbers are through the roof. So he's good on that end, but offensively, he didn't really do much. And since then, he's become the Robin to Quisenberry's Batman. I don't know if I couldn't really tell you if this was coming from him, especially with the amount of points that he's put up. Now, last game against Davidson, like I said in the intro, was a little bit of a shell shock to the entire group. He only had 6 points, but he had a steal. He's handling the ball a lot. I think for him, as a graduate student, to lead a relatively younger group, that's going to be huge for them long term. But what he's become was way above what I thought he was going to be.
And the naysayers would say, you know, he's coming into the Atlantic 10 conference and he's a role player. But someone who looks at it, when you're scoring whatever he was, 6 points at Georgia Tech, and then you go into a conference like the Atlantic 10, you don't know what to expect because there's so much more opportunity. The competition definitely is not as strong, the size of the players. So there's going to be an improvement, not on all the transfer portal players, but a guy like Khalid is an example of someone who goes from a P6 to Atlantic 10 and is so far shining. So you talk about Ish. Are we surprised? Well, maybe. But are we surprised at Khalid? I don't know.
I think it was definitely a back and forth because you didn't really know he could do this offensively. But he just looks so much more physically mature and grown up than most of the league, at least, because he played at the ACC for 4 years and he went to the tournament and won the ACC 1 year. So all of that really, really can account for what he adds to this team.
Sure. He's battle tested, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a guy like Darius Quisenberry. He surprised everyone from Youngstown State last year, and he's off to a phenomenal start, except against Davidson. And what was he, 1 for 11 or
Yep, he was 1 for 10. Yeah.
yeah. And he's so consistent. So that shows whoever you have on a team, there's always going to be those nights. I think that's an anomaly on him. What type of player is he? He almost had a triple double recently.
He
The
is
scorer or more.
so he came in as a scorer.
Hmm.
He definitely has still lived up to being a scorer. Now, again, the Davidson game was a little bit of an anomaly for him because it wasn't something that most people that follow his trajectory are accustomed to. But he doesn't have any problems with who will take the last shot because Keith Urgo likes to move the ball. He likes to run. And Quisenberry sort of is in this point guard platoon with Antrel Charleton. Khalid Moore does a lot of dribbling. Kyle Rose does a lot of dribbling. There's a lot of guys who dribble, but there's not a Yuri Collins or let me think back. There's no Fats Russell, right? There's none of those guys, at least on the Fordham team, not yet anyway. Some of the freshmen have that potential, but they're only freshmen. So how much, can they really do in their first year? And there's sometimes you get that, but in this case so far, it's sort of by committee, at least with the passing and the ball handling, but everyone can go off the dribble in some capacity. People can shoot threes normally, but that didn't happen against Davidson. But Quisenberry, he plays the one. He almost plays like a two, however, at the one, if that makes any sense, because he does shoot a lot for what's supposed to be a point guard. And that honestly it's not a negative to Fordham because they do need the shooting.
Yeah.
So him being able to do that and he can still pass the ball off is good because he has guys around him who can do other stuff. But he kind of plays one, then he'll start shooting a lot if he gets hot. That's sort of his game.
And now you mentioned Antrel Charleton, and he looks like a guy that I wish we had, which is the quintessential point guard that plays. He embraces that role as a point guard, and he has about 4.7 assists. I like someone who knows his role and is a pass first type of guy. What about him? How do you feel he's doing fitting in with the rest of the team?
I think he's been very good. This is second year starting, 4 assists in the last game. But overall, Antrel Charleton came into Fordham sort of as like a do it all, stop everyone sort of role. He's not the best 3-point shooter, but he doesn't have to shoot too much given the fact that there's a lot of mouths to feed offensively. So he can just take the role of handling the basketball, playing good defense, rebounding, and if he's got to go to the basket, he can do that. His free throw percentage has skyrocketed this year from 67 to 91 in his second year at Fordham. That's a big jump. So for him being able to improve that, as long as he can still hit a standing 3-pointer, they're going to be all right in that regard. But he is sort of like a Dylan Adewusu from St. John's type of player, right? This big wings built type of guy, but he's a guard, but he's bigger for his position, which
6'5". What happened with the shooting at the 3-point arc after the Davidson game? If you look at the statistics there, what was the case in that? And your thoughts on that?
Well, a lot of credit should go to Matt McKillip. And at media day, I remember talking to him sitting at the table. He was talking about how he thought his team could be good defensively as well as offensively for the first time in a while. Now, if you understand Bob McKillip and you know how his teams are, they're always really, really, really good at offense. And their defense was above average. I wouldn't say it was mediocre, but it was definitely above average most seasons. But Matt McKillip knows how to make use of what he's got. He doesn't have too much in terms of serious A10 talent right now, other than Foster Loyer and Sam Menenga, if you look at it on paper. But what he did was as soon as the ball hit the paint, you bring a double, you deny any chance of a kick out, and even on non-shooters that they would deem as non-shooters, Davidson, you would still contest, right?
Mhm.
And they were extremely physical. They went right to the basket. And that's really what threw Fordham off. They started to overthink a little bit with how much they were going to start shooting. But in the second half, they started to hit their threes. They got to the free throw line more. They started to play inside, which really is a benefit for them because they're so big, Fordham, right? Their
Mhm.
smallest guy that plays is maybe about 6'2", 6'3", right?
Yeah.
So the fact that they can weaponize being tall and big was a plus, and it did keep Fordham in the game. And they were really good in the paint. They had 9 blocks as a team. Davidson only really shot 35% from the field, 25 from 3 for the game. The only reason Fordham lost is because they just didn't shoot the ball well, and they
Mhm.
let some rebounds get away from them. But it was really very simple stuff and things that normally don't go that way. That's how they went, and that's why they lost. But other than that, Fordham easily could have stolen this game.
What about the son, McKillip? Do they still feel like that typical Davidson team that just plays smart and is very hard to beat, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't beat themselves at all, and they have great shooters and
Well, I think when you lose the player of the year, another all conference guy, and your fourth leading scorer who goes to Stanford, right? I think that obviously the aesthetic will change, but they kept Foster Lawyer, which was huge. Sam Menenga took a leap, as a lot of people expected, and I think he's going to win A10's most improved player. I don't know if anyone else really who might compete with him right now for that. But for Matt McKillip, it feels offensively not much like his dad. They didn't shoot as many threes as I thought they were going to when they played Fordham, but they were very physical. They didn't, like you said, they didn't beat themselves. They know how to make use of what they've got. I think Matt's going to be a good fit for that school. Obviously, he knows the system. He played in it at one point for his dad, so he knows what Davidson has to be. In terms of how he's going to maybe change things, I think defensively is how he's going to change things. It's because of the
oh,
strategy of what he can do with what he's got. He knows how to use his guys, right? Desmond Watson, Sam Menenga, Reed Bailey, excuse me,
mhm.
all those guys, Grant Huffman, beyond a Lawyer or a Menenga. He knows how to use his role players. I think that's what's going to really change for that program is getting more guys involved, especially on the defensive side.
Yeah, and don't forget about last year. No one was looking at them, and what did they do? They went foreign and got all the players over the seas that no one knew, and then Foster, and suddenly they're battling for the title. Is this team capable of doing the same again uh, in a light Atlantic 10 year, or they just don't have the talent, the
I
horses?
think that remains to be seen. That would be my answer for that because we
Yeah.
don't know. It's too early to tell. It was one game, and the
Hmm.
A10, like we talked about, is all over the place this year. There's no clear cut. Oh, that's the team that's going to run away with it, right? There's no there that doesn't exist this year.
One other point before we move to the next slide is you have like a two-headed monster at center. We're both players, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce.
Oh, well,
Can you do that for me?
Rostakavitsky, like Dirk. That's how
Okay.
you pronounce his name, like
Really?
Dirk's
Okay.
last name.
That's not so hard. And then there's another gentleman on there, and they both average about 14 points a game, and they have the size. And size has been giving Rhode Island fits all year. It was most demonstrated against Providence, where they're always big, and we had a lot of trouble inside with their big. So I'm a little concerned now that you're telling me about the size of Fordham, what that's going to do, because
I don't mean to scare you.
well, it is if you know about Rhode Island, and
They're
now
always small. Yep.
yeah, and we're even smaller now, and we don't have that true center. And he did play against Providence and Joseph at Bilal, so it's just something. But tell me about your center position. It looks like you're doing well in that area too. And
So Abdou Simbila has been the big center. His story he came over from Cameroon, went to high school, I think in the Pennsylvania area. And I don't know if it was near Happy Valley, so I don't remember off the top of my head. But he went to Penn State, played sparingly, would be generous to say, at Penn State. Urgo leaves to come to Fordham. Simbila, along with again Pat Kelly and DJ Gordon, followed him. And Simbila, the back end of last year in the Atlantic 10, maybe around, I want to say, the fourth or fifth conference game, when Antonio Day had left, Darius Quisenberry had dropped 36 on Davidson. They lost by 3, and no Chuba Ohams in that game. Abdu Simbila, now granted, he doesn't score many points, but he's improved his rebounding. Last year at the back end of the A10 schedule, he picked up a ton of steam. And he was really keen. People were keen on him becoming a light version of Mitchell Robinson on the Knicks, right? A rim running center who can jump, but he's a little stronger, I think, maybe than Robinson. Now, again, I'm comparing a college kid to an NBA guy, but
Yeah.
if you're scaling it down, yeah. But if you're scaling it down to this level, he's stronger than most kids would be where he is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he has really gotten better at timing with blocking shots, extremely physical, used to put the ball on the floor a ton when he would be in the pick and roll. And now he keeps it over his head. And there was the one play he had last game, he just threw it down in 2 people's face. He's really improved. And I think they're keen on making him better. And Rostik Nowitzki, who came from junior college, he was last year out of a walking boot. Then he was hurt again, and then he was all over the place with his minutes. But he really has also shined in his role as the backup center, and extremely long, extremely talented with rebounding. He knows how to use his body on the offensive end. So it's almost like a mirror, right?
Yeah.
Simbila's the defensive guy. Rostik Nowitzki is the offensive center. And they can play that way, which really, I think, opens up a lot for Fordham. And they're trying to unlock the jump shots, especially with Simbila. But Nowitzki can step out and hit a 3. Simbila is starting to hoist up the jumpers very, very, very slowly. But they're really trying to unlock that part of their game.
Wow. And Soriano's gone, and he's number 3 in the nation rebounds, if I'm correct. But I don't know if you feel that bad after telling me, what you're saying here. We're looking at the schedule. I know you had a weak schedule, but look at Arkansas. How did the Mitchell twins do?
Oh, yes, the twins. They were okay.
Yeah.
The twins are funny because everywhere the one goes, the other must follow. It's like a cardinal sin for one to not follow the other.
They finish each other's sentences. And just looking at the rest of the schedule, you had the Tulane game. And a lot of obviously easy games. And I think you're down at the very end as far as toughness of schedule, and that might bite you at the end, even if you do better than expected in the Atlantic 10. Almost to the point where there's one Rhody fan that said, if you're 23 wins, you may not make the NIT. I know that's a tough question. How do you feel about that? Do you agree with it?
I don't really know, honestly, because they're still trying to build the team.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to get better from last year, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what the group is focused on. That's what the coaches want to do, is just get better from last year. And I know they're not worrying about postseason. They just take it one game at a time. They treat every game like the Super Bowl. They treat every game as if it's the last game of the year, the championship game. So one game at a time for this group. And then, maybe down the road, you can start talking about CBI or NITs, NCAAs. Then you can start talking about it. But right now in year 2, it's hard to gauge any sort of postseason goals. But like I said, it's just to improve from last year.
Well, when you see the type of teams that other Atlantic 10 teams lost to, you did win those games. And there's a lot to be said, because with the transfer portal, anyone could beat anyone on any given night, even the top teams, aside from Duke and Gonzaga. So you have to give yourself credit for that. Do you have some time for some fan questions?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so here's a question about the Davidson game, and you were out rebounded 56-33. You're only is this correct? 3 for 31 on three.
Yep, that's right.
How much of this was Davidson's defense, and how much was Fordham having an off night? And was Davidson that much better? And you talk about the strength and size, but here it looks like it didn't happen that way.
So Davidson, again, they're not that good in terms of on paper, right?
Yeah.
It's Foster Lawyer and Sam Menenga, and then who else? It's a bunch of freshmen. Desmond Watson, who didn't do much last year, but he's been better this year. Grant Huffman, who is all over the place, right? He's shooting, I think, sub 20% from three. But Matt McKillip knew what to do with what he had. And to Fordham's credit, their plan was to shut Foster Lawyer down, which they did, because he only had 4 points. He came in averaging over 20. He had 4 points on 1 of 7 shooting. He didn't hit a single three. And the other one was to protect the paint, right? Fordham had 9 blocks, and they only turned the other problem was the turnovers with the Fordham team, right? Fordham was 42nd going into the Davidson game in the country in turnovers. They had 7 last game. And if you told me that like before the game, or like I was just watching it on ESPN maybe for like a half a second, and then I would turn it off to a different game, and you told me those numbers, I would be thinking Fordham's got to be winning, right? Those are incredible. But most of it, I think, was them having an off night. Some of it was certainly Davidson's defense. They shut down the Batman and they dared Robbins to beat them, which happened. But that's, again, it'll happen to this team because they're still very young. They're still trying to build their program. But it was definitely a mix of a lot of stuff. And to say if Davidson was that much better, I'm going to go with no. But they do historically have Fordham's number. And again, I think Matt McKillip knows what he's doing, and he knows how to use what he's got.
Also, tell me about the Arkansas game. That was your only loss besides Davidson, and they're a top 10 ranked team. That seems like it was an interesting game. Anyway, just having the ability to get a game in the schedule of the caliber of an Arkansas.
I think the biggest thing was they were down 11 at halftime, and they certainly didn't let up. I mean, they didn't throw in the towel. They were still diving on the floor with 2 or 3 minutes left to go in the game.
Yeah.
But going into that game, I can't speak for anyone that's within the team. But I personally didn't think they were going to win that game. I thought it would be a nice sort of, this is what a top 10 team looks like. Not that Fordham wants to be that like this year. I don't know if they could be, but that's what a top 10 team looks like. This is what a potential champion looks like. And I think for them, they said, hey, you know what? Thanks, Eric Musselman, for kicking our behinds. And then they realized we've got the athletes to do the things that they do. And Urgo had said that in a press conference. So I'm sort of quoting him here, but he realized, you know what? We've got the kids to do the things that Arkansas did to us. Why don't we take advantage of it? But that was a game for the freshmen and everyone to get better and realize, this is what it's going to be like. And that was the biggest thing for them. And it really helped them in the out of conference schedule.
Well, that Musselman really loves the Twitter. I don't know how he has time to coach.
I feel like someone's doing it for him, but he's just dictating.
As a handler there.
Yeah, he has someone.
He has that personality injected in those tweets. Also, how did you get Khalid Moore to Fordham? Did he reach out to Fordham, or did
I don't know. I don't know too much about how they got him. I think maybe he wanted to come home, and Fordham was on the list of schools that he could go home to, and they have a notoriously good graduate school program. So I think he saw that and realized, you know what, I can come here, come home, be close to family, and then play basketball for one more year. And he really enjoys being at Fordham, from what I can tell. From what I see from the team, there don't seem to be any, groups of friends in the team. Everyone seems to get along, which is good. And having a guy like Khalid Moore to have the ability that he has can change an entire game.
Yeah. Well, if you do find out, please enter it in the comment section. And also for the fans that are listening to this show, if you have any more questions, Thomas, do you think you'll be able to handle a few more questions in the comments section?
Oh, I can.
Do some digging. I'd like to know about, I think that's an excellent question from someone from the Keeney board, Keeney Blue. And then there's people that think that 12-2 is a fluke, won't last. What do you say about that?
I think the 12-2, taking care of your business in the out of conference schedule, given what the Atlantic 10 went through with that, is a win, right? And it credits to Fordham. Duquesne handled their business. UMass, for the most part, handled their out of conference business. I know St. Louis had a couple of okay wins, but if you look at the rest of the conference, Dayton, I mean, they're injured to hell and back, but they lost a lot of games they shouldn't have. VCU was relatively disappointing in their out of conference schedule. St. Bonaventure got beat up by Iona, as well as St. Louis. But look, I mean, 12-2 for this team. Anyone pre Neptune or Urgo would have been 5-7.
Yeah,
that's just how it would have been, right? But I think
for you, Thomas. Stick up for your team. Good for you. Stick up for the Rams.
Well, look, that's how it would be in past iterations, but they can handle their business, the games they're supposed to win, and they did that. Now it's sort of, you're kind of walking around in the dark a little bit, and it's not that they're not good. It's just a matter of how much better will you get in the conference? I think that remains to be seen.
And you kind of delved into this next question, the transition from Kyle Neptune to your new head coach. Anything else to weigh in on that? You were talking about a little bit. Sounded like they were both part of the Villanova regime.
Yeah, it was pretty easy. I mean, I consider Urgo more of a Pat Chambers disciple. Penn State, he's got that little bit of a blue collar attitude to him. He wants to win. He's super competitive. Chambers, I know, is a little bit like that as well. He's probably a little bit more free with how he approaches things, but that transition for them has been pretty smooth. And a lot of the kids coming back also helps that. But for the most part, it's been good. The kids like Keith Urgo and they like being at the school.
Yeah. Here's another one. And do you think Fordham can win the Atlantic 10 and why? And for our viewers, I'd like to hear your opinions of that too. But what do you think about that question?
I don't know. It's a good question. We have to see them play against a Dayton or a St. Louis, a Bonaventure. I think that's when we'll get a better indicator of how good Fordham is. A Duquesne perhaps could be a good test for them. The league's definitely wide open, so I won't discount that. Can Fordham make a run? I think that's entirely within the cards. Can they win the whole thing? I think is a different question. They are, again, 5 freshmen. There's growing pains, and you have to find a way. You got to keep people healthy, but you also have to find a way to step up what makes you Fordham, and that's being good on the defensive glass, rebounding, playing good defense, and shooting the basketball. You got to figure out that last element because they're better. Their splits are generally average. They're absurdly good at paint defense. And I know blocks are not the end all be all of defense,
9 blocks though. That's
but they're also third in the country in blocks per game as a team. But their splits from shooting, they're again for another team they would be average, but they're not impossible to maintain. If they can, I think that it's better for them to make a nice run, get to the quarterfinals again, keep it a close game, or maybe win a close game in the quarters and go to the semifinals, which that hasn't happened since 2006. So it's been a while since they've gone to the semifinals. But winning the A10, I think they're a couple of years away from that. Mm-hmm. Making a run is certainly within the cards.
And with your shot blocking ability, we have a guy who likes to take it to the hole, Malik Martin. So maybe he has to rethink that against your team. I don't know. But what needs to improve after you've seen 14 games now?
Definitely the shooting. I know that's been a common finger pointer for what needs to get better. Again, the splits are average. They're shooting around, I have the number. Some of these numbers are always, they're just all over the place, right? Because you look at them and then they change the next day. That's college basketball, but
of course,
they're 70.
Could.
Oh yeah, they're shooting 76% from the line as a team.
Yeah,
they're shooting 34% from three. Their overall field goal percentage is 44%. Now, those aren't the best numbers. They're not the worst numbers. They're definitely in the average ballpark, and they're not impossible to maintain because Fordham's defense will carry them through games. But if the shooting splits, if you shoot as a team like 36, close to 80, which would be like 79% from the line, and you shoot almost 48% from the field, that for Fordham could maybe propel them to an Atlantic 10 championship at one point, not this year, but at one point. I do think the shooting has been the biggest thing. And as again, the other one would be, you got to think about this too. Khalid Moore and Jarius Quisenberry, this is it for them in college basketball. They don't have any years of eligibility left. So how you have to replace those two, obviously, is part of the what needs to improve. You got to have some guys step up.
Well, with the transfer portal, you may be able to do something very quickly. No, I'd like to hear from the rest of the fans in the comment section. Can Fordham win the Atlantic 10? Talking about 44%, we would love to shoot 44% on our team. And everything was higher before that game. I think you were at 3-point, I think you were at 39%, if I remember correctly.
36, yeah.
36. So here's a few more. Why haven't you seen a significant investment in the program? Maybe you have in the last few years because there has been improvement. But what has been the reason for such a school like Fordham with the stature that you have as a university?
Well, I do think the new athletic administration is they're more pro basketball than they have been in previous iterations. Not to say that there were athletic directors who were anti-basketball. They were certainly pro basketball, and they understood that basketball obviously brings the school money. But they had the locker room renovated last year for the men's team. They're building a new student center on campus. They're working, and that's going to be about a 5 or 6 year project, maybe a little bit longer from what I've heard. They're also working on new athletic facilities, which are going to be coming at some point. So
really,
you have to remember Fordham has football, but football does take a lot of money, obviously, to fund because you got to buy equipment and all that. And there's a lot more guys on a football team than there are on a basketball team. So you're competing with that. But I think at the same time, when those two teams and our women's basketball team at Fordham is always very good, even post Stephanie Gately. When those three teams are really good, it creates this excitement around campus that gets people to go to games, right? And there's a reason for them to go because the teams are good. I think that's been more so, at least in this early phase of what this athletic administration wants to do, is build an excitement around the sports teams. And once obviously you get more donors and more people start going to games, TV contracts and what have you, then I think more of that money will start getting put into a physical thing. So I think they're starting to do that. I can't speak on how much money they've made or any of that sort of stuff, but they've certainly keened in on creating a culture around not just the basketball programs, but around Fordham sports in general. I know that's been discussed. Obviously, people do want that, but if you have to look at it this way, and this is how I tell people this, when you build real estate in Manhattan, it's a lot more money than if we're building out in Nebraska or Rhode Island, right? It's a lot more money. So you got to think of it that way. But I think they're trying to upgrade what they can. I think the Rosehill Gym, because it's the oldest gym in college basketball, it's historic and it's considered a hidden gem, right? And a lot of they take pride in that in the history of the school. There's a ton of NIT banners inside of the gym. There's a couple NCAAs, a lot of women's banners, a couple retired numbers. But I think that old feeling of Rosehill of that gym, I think is a tone setter for the type of team that Fordham wants to be. On campus arena, I don't know how big we would be talking here. If someone would imply maybe what Duquesne or a VCU has, obviously that would be nice. But I think a lot of people would still prefer the nice old Rosehill Gymnasium.
But we're just going through our schedule, and one of our weaknesses is closing out games, and we've lost some really tough games. Brown, and a lot of games where we're winning the whole game and then we lose, and Brown was one of those games, and others I was very happy with our effort against Tulane. Boston College was another example of winning most of the game, and then at the end that would have been a nice win. So we might be one of the best 4-9 teams in the country. Just our weaknesses for you guys, and I hope you bring in a lot of Fordham eyeballs to this show and closing out games. Jalen Carey from Syracuse is just getting better and better. I'm very happy for him. We miss a lot of easy baskets inside, and we also give up offensive rebounds for more points inside. We don't have the length on defense. That's why I was so worried about your size. 3-point shooting is really tough for us this year. We haven't had that third person. Maybe Jalen Carey is that. It's been the Ish and Brayon show. So I'm starting to think we need a fourth person now. I think Jalen is the third person. And turnovers late in the game, last plays, and then offensive droughts. Those are some of the weaknesses. Any comments on that for you, or just what we're seeing? And this is all because we went the hard way. Archie didn't bring in transfer portal people and win right away like other schools. I haven't mentioned UMass. Did I say that out loud? So this is just the part of building a program, not just a season.
Yeah, I think definitely for now, if Archie decided to go that route where he brings in guys who are projects from the portal, it's not to say that bringing in a Brandon Weston or any of those guys that he brought in, a Freeman, on paper is bad. It certainly isn't. Obviously, Weston hadn't played much at Seton Hall.
Yeah.
But if you bring in guys like that who have more of a long-term potential, I think that's really how you gotta build the program that way. That's what Fordham did a little bit last year. I think that's what UMass did a lot this year, is you bring in those younger guys that are in the portal who have talent. Can you build them to be something greater? That's really where the challenge lies. And I think Archie, he knows that. I think he knew coming in that his team wouldn't be that good. I don't know if he thought it would be this bad to start the year, but long term, I don't see why this could be an issue in terms of how good some of these kids could become, especially Brayon Freeman, who was all A10 freshman last year. He reminds me a little bit of David Hawkins from Temple. That's a throwback name. You remember that guy? That's who he sort of reminds me of. I think
I have to look him up after the show.
Yeah, you got to look him up. But Hawkins was pretty damn good at Temple when he was there. But Freeman reminds me of him a little bit in terms of the trajectory that his college career could be. But I do like some of the pieces that the Rams have. Obviously, the big man situation's not the best. I know Anthony Harris, that's an up in the air situation. But in terms of what Archie's working with right now, he's trying to get the most out of it. I think that's all you can really hope for at the moment.
So about Ant. That's pretty good. Our strengths, we have the potential to have an all-star backcourt. They're going through a few games now, but at one point they were so dominant, Brayon and Ish. And I say this, Ish has to be more selfish. Shoot the rock a little more. But we play hard. Is Harris coming? I'd like to see him on the bench. We have the talent. Foul shooting's pretty good. So that's what we have there. To wrap it up, I have one question for you. Who's going to win the game, Thomas? And what's the score? You got to give me something here.
I have okay. Oh, I got to think of something.
You
Goodness.
know what you're getting into by coming on to the show.
Look, it's part of the job. But I think this is going to be a close game, given that URI again, they're not good, but they do play hard. They can do all those things that you mentioned, and as long as you play hard, I think for a team, what Archie's doing with it, that's all you can ask for. I think Fordham will squeak it out. I need a score, don't I? See,
Yes,
this is the thing. This is the thing because there's nights they're going to score 88 points and then they'll score 65 the next game. I'm going to go. I will go with 78-69. Fordham wins, but I think it gets close in the first half and halfway through the second half. I'm going to say that.
Okay. And anyone else want to chime in? Put your comments in the comments section on YouTube. I'm going to go with 64-62, and it's going to be on the heels of Rayon and Ish and Jalen, which has happened before, maybe one other person. So that's mine. But listen, Thomas, you under-promised, over-delivered. You've got a great career. You're a young guy, and you're solid. You have a lot of poise. So, and the knowledge is there. And thanks for refuting some of the mistakes that I've read.
No, thanks for having me on, Scott. It's always fun to hop on the opposing pods. So this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you asking me. I appreciate the kind words, but looking to stay connected along the way as we move forward January 4th.
Yeah. And of course, when it's Rhody basketball, it's always GoRhody.